Hey, GB learners, and thank you for joining me for today's episode of Tech Tuesday. So, I wanted to try and cover something that's kind of happens every year, and I thought it would be useful to go over. So, as of tomorrow is the new Wednesday of August, where all the new doctors basically and normally would join the profession, and everyone would kind of rotate around in hospitals as well as in general practice to rotations and things. And every year, as a result of that, we have our tips for new docs, a hashtag that goes around and tries to share, the words of wisdom, hopefully, that can help the new batch of colleagues and stuff in terms of managing how they get on. Well, I thought I'd give my own little flair to this, which is our tech tips for new docs. And I hope you find this useful and effective. And I've just got ready for you guys a short presentation about kind of things that you need to consider when it comes to effectively the tips for new doctors. This is on the starting of what I hope to do for next week, which is a more specific one for general practice. So if you are interested in seeing this in more detail, and specifically the general practice focus, feel free to join me next Wednesday at 12:30, where I'll be going through that in a lot more detail. Like most of the lives, you've got the opportunity to say hi, to get involved, to ask questions and that kind of stuff. And you're welcome to do that for this session as well. So if you did want to ask a question, feel free to do so. But shall we get started? Yeah, why not? Let's get cracking, shall we? So I have, like I said, got a little bit of a presentation for you guys, and as soon as my thing starts working, there we go. Off we go. So as I said, this is our tech tips for new doctors. And I wanted to start off with basically covering 6 key areas. So we're going to look at the types of things that can help from communication aspect, med tech in particular. Unfortunately, I'm now home, so I did plan on doing this from my practice, but I had one of these weird days where actually I was able to leave early, and as a result of that, I wasn't on call as well. So I've actually come home, so I don't have a lot of the equipment with me. But when I go through the live stream in general practice next Wednesday, I'll have all of it there because I will be doing that for my practice itself. Going to cover a few simple apps that you may want to consider. Definitely a couple of things like typing faster. It's one of my big fan things that I think for many people, and how you can do that as well. And then just wanted to look at a couple of things like well-being and learning as well in particular. So again, if you do want to share your own things, feel free to do so. But let's get cracking with communication. So I think there's different ways that communication can be enhanced, particularly when you start working as a new doctor, and particularly when you work in a new environment. And definitely one of the key things is messaging. Now, you may think, well, this is kind of obvious. Well, one thing to remember is that the way that you message people is going to be important, and also the route that you use. Hospitals traditionally less tech keen and have started moving forward, particularly in the post-COVID era, in terms of using messaging and that kind of stuff a lot more effectively. And now we have quite a few different offers and companies that we can look at using more effectively than WhatsApp. And I guess the reason why I say this, so WhatsApp is definitely not secure for patient data. That's one thing to be always aware of. And if you are, as a hospital team, using WhatsApp to communicate about patient data, really shouldn't be doing that. Absolutely not. There are much better options available for you that are data compliant and stuff. And I guess ones that I would definitely suggest that you consider are things like Silo, Pando, which used to be called Forward, Medic Bleep, Bleeper. There's lots of really good messaging type apps that exist that can help you. And some of these even has to have things like task management embedded within them, and particularly are very good for a hospital-based environment. When we're talking about general practice, there's a couple of different things to consider. We obviously have more complex and more detailed electronic health records that allow a lot of this to happen, as well as other systems. Obviously, MS Teams is one of the big ones at the moment that is available now to anybody working within the NHS as well. Definitely worth considering. And I guess it's worth using also other methods of communication. So as I mentioned, every year there's the hashtag tips for new docs, and social media itself is a great method of communication to help engage with people and stuff in terms of how you may be doing things. And it's important to recognize that there are various different ways that you can engage with social media as a new doctor, in terms of whether that's through more traditional social media platforms like Facebook, which has numerous groups that you may want to consider joining, particularly as a GP, and I've covered various of those online if you wanted to. But also Twitter is an amazing platform in terms of engaging with people and having the level playing field when it comes to discussing things with people. Instagram is obviously a massively growing platform, and even TikTok, which I know some of you have engaged with over the whole COVID period and stuff. But I guess in terms of communication, probably not so focused. It is going to be your Facebook and your Twitter that's going to be the more likely ones to have those, peer level discussions and stuff with. One important thing to remember when it comes to social media use as well is that you need to be focused on abiding by guidance. And this is particularly for our newer colleagues that are joining the profession. It's important to remember that social media guidance does exist for doctors. And it's important to recognize this and also to engage with it because of the simple fact that actually you can be caught foul of it. And this has happened in the past. Many clinicians have felt to make appropriate posts, but actually when you look back at it with the retrospectoscope and things, these things may often be posted in the heat of the moment and that kind of thing, and actually are not appropriate for clinicians to be doing so. There's various different elements of guidance, and feel free to check out that video that talks about it. I guess when it comes to communication, though, one thing that I definitely would recommend many people look at, there are some really cool apps and options available out there for you to help. And you may want to consider whether they can be useful. Before we get onto those, though, I did want to mention those as well. Also, I'm not going to be focusing on that on this episode. There's loads of consultation resources out there to help you from a digital perspective. And if you did want to check them out, feel free to do so. So there's a sample of them there for you. And if you've got your phone available with you, just hold it up to the screen on that QR code. Will take you to the website page that basically lets you access all of this directly. And if you don't have your phone with you, well, you can use this link as well that's coming up right now that takes you straight to that page as well. It's got all the various different pieces of information and guidance and all that kind of stuff that you may want to use. Anyway, let's crack on, shall we? So, in terms of, got myself confused slightly. So I mentioned about other kind of apps and stuff that you may want to consider. One thing to think about, and one I would really recommend, particularly for the newly joining doctors, is an app called Induction. So this, again, is one of the apps that was verified on the clinical communications providers thing that unfortunately I can't quite remember the name of. And this is basically an app that allows you to access various different numbers and stuff for people within your own hospital. I have commented on how this could also be useful for GPs and in particular areas where they don't have access to this kind of information through other routes. So, for example, in my area, we have something called F12 that allows us to directly contact particular specialties and stuff. Actually, Induction can be a really good mechanism because it's done all the hard work of finding the relevant numbers, and it actually uses inbuilt crowdsourcing from your own users to clarify the numbers as well. So if they were to change, it gives you the right information and stuff. Big shout out to the company. I actually really like their thing, and I've used it a few times within Nottingham, despite having the F12 format, to try and contact people when I've needed to in terms of access and stuff. But it's definitely worthwhile looking at if your hospital engages in that. When we talk about new tips, though, med tech is definitely one that many people are interested in. And I guess taking something as simple as the humble stethoscope may be one way of improving the way that you do things. I've recently been using a Bluetooth stethoscope, which works really well. It's really nice, actually. It's really cool to try to use as a tool to try and enhance the audio in particular, compared to my bog standard stethoscope, which has been tried and tested and still works amazingly well, I must point out. But adding a little bit of Bluetooth, it's surprising what adding a bit of Bluetooth onto things can do. But it does allow different case uses. So the fact that you can stream your audio direct to a PC elsewhere or through an app and things means that actually you don't have to be in the physical location of the person to therefore listen to their chest. And this has clearly been useful over the COVID period. But in particular, in terms of care home residencies and that kind of stuff can be really effective. And particularly if you're dealing with large areas and super speciality clinics, I think would be a really good use in things. But additionally, one of the main things I would recommend all new doctors consider is just simple basics. And so we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs of, things like food, shelter, all those kind of things that you need at the basics before you can do all the more complicated things like kind of work and, self-actualize and all that kind of stuff. But let's be honest, we live in the modern age, and in the modern age, even below food and everything else nowadays, we have Wi-Fi, and even below that, we have battery power. So make sure you've got yourself a little bit of a charger or a power bank and stuff that you keep with you available at work and stuff. Because you may not find a plug. You shouldn't really be using the hospital plugs, to be honest. But a cable to access your phone. I'm a big fan of the triple chargers, so the ones that basically allow me to charge my micro USB, my nano USB, and my iPhone if I needed to. Although I don't actually have an iPhone, so most of my friends end up using that off me, and has been done so in many conferences and things. But I think having those kind of pieces of equipment is really useful and stuff, and it can help in terms of your onwards journey. In terms of apps, I guess there are a couple I would definitely recommend as a massive tech tip for new doctors. And in particular, one I'm going to absolutely mention is the BNF app. And my personal held belief that any doctor, pretty much every nurse and definitely pharmacists and other kind of clinicians and stuff should have this on their phone. Purely and simply, it is the best clinical app available. It is the resource when it comes to looking at medications. And the fact that it's available as an app and is free for clinicians, particularly if you use your nhs.net email address, is simply, it's just a must own. It's constantly updated and kept at that level compared to some of the challenges that are there with print versions. And the fact you can switch between the child and the adult BNF with a couple of clicks is just awesome. And it's completely searchable. I must admit, I'm not a big fan of the new format BNF. The way that I find it a lot harder to use than what it was a few years ago. But the benefit of the app is you can just type in a couple of characters and you get to the relevant sections that you need within instance. And I still maintain that this is probably the best clinical app available and should be on the phone of every single clinician going. But then we talk about non-clinical apps as well. And I think one that I would highly recommend, particularly if you're starting off as a new doctor, is having a password manager app. And the one in particular I use is something called LastPass. Highly recommend it. And if you wanted to use my affiliate link, feel free to do so. But the reason why I recommend this, so simply put, we know that in the NHS, we have numerous numbers of emails that we have to keep track of in terms of whether it's access to software, access to computers, and we have, unfortunately, many systems that we have to integrate within. Just in my practice alone, I can end up engaging with 6 different systems throughout the day. And that doesn't include my emails. And that's just really frustrating to have to remember the different password levels and protection and all the other kind of things and usernames and all that kind of stuff. So having it in a secure portal that you can access is really effective, particularly if you end up going on leave or something like that and you just forget things. It happens to all of us. It's happened to me. I forgot my password once when I went away for 2.5 weeks. Couldn't remember it for the life of me, couldn't get onto the computer, had to have a complete reboot in order to do so. And that took a lot of time and effort, and that was really frustrating. So I definitely recommend a password manager app. My personal preference is LastPass. I think it works really well. It's a simple thing and it's free. If you wanted to, you don't have to pay for it at all. However, I do pay for it because it allows extra functionality that suits me. So particularly the 2-factor authentication. So my app can actually be geolocated, so it'll only access particular things when I'm at work, because I would only access them when I'm at work, which is the extra security for me. And I think that's really cool and awesome. So definitely recommend that for you and my colleagues and stuff. And if you want to be quicker, hands down, the best way to work quicker in practice, this is general practice as well as within the hospitals as they increasingly use more and more computers, is learn to type faster. It is a skill. It's not something that can easily be picked up. And there are still many people that unfortunately have to still touch type because they still haven't developed that muscle memory. Well, if you want to do so, check out this website called Keybar. I've got a little video there for you if you wanted to have a look at that goes through it. And the links to all of this are down in the show notes and stuff. But effectively, it's a way of training your muscle memory of your fingers to type quicker. And I've done this. I practiced with it for a bit and I went from 30 words a minute up to about 45 is what I'm currently doing, which is not that fast, to be honest. I know some people who can type considerably faster than this. I remember doing competition. I think one of our eGP learners got up to something like 75 words per minute. I've got a typist in my practice who apparently can type 90 words a minute. That is just awesome. And it also checks you for accuracy, which is the cool thing, because there's no point being able to type super fast if you have to go back and change everything 3 times over. So definitely check that out if you want to learn how to type faster and stuff. But despite all these kind of things, we need to also look after ourselves. And this is really important, I feel, that, we look at well-being, and tech can help with well-being. I think one of the best and one of my most recommended apps is something called Sleepio. And the reason why I recommend this is sleep is a massive part of what we do. And particularly as doctors, sleep is a really bad thing that we tend to do, particularly if you end up doing nights and that kind of stuff. Well, Sleepio is first of all validated. It is one of the few apps that is actually recommended by NICE. I want that to sink in. So NICE have actually recommended that this is a suitable method to consider for treatment for patients. So therefore, I think for us, that'd be awesome. And it works. It's so good at what it does. I love the fact that it's not generic sleep advice that it gives you, that it tailors that advice based on the information you put into it. And I recommend this often to my patients, but to myself as well. I found it really effective and useful in terms of understanding how I can sleep better. So definitely recommend Sleepio. In terms of if you're looking for a more well-being based app, whilst there are some really cool ones out there, and I've reviewed things like Headspace, and Calm also has a healthcare offer that allows you to access it for free for a month, I believe, and possibly even longer post-COVID. One I really am a big fan of is something called Shiny Minds. So I must admit, in Nottingham, we've got our own specific kind of version of this. But in terms of the app itself, it's quite good, if I'm being honest. It's got loads of extra functions like being able to send positive messages to colleagues and receive them from colleagues. It's got the work kind of books and stuff that you can go off and do, and they can be based either audio, visual, or written, depending on which format you prefer. And it's just a nice way of trying to kind of work on your well-being. I must admit, I do dip in and out of it rather than using it regularly, which is probably why I don't get the most benefit out of it. But at the same time, I feel I'm okay with that. But I know many of my colleagues have found real use and benefit from it, and it is something that is available to NHS workers and stuff. You do need to check for your local area, and you do need to sign up via your local area, so it may not be accessible to all of you. If not, definitely check out things like Calm and Headspace. And I guess for those tech addicted people, I'm not looking in the mirror purposely, because I guess that would be really hard for me to do so right now. But reducing your engagement with devices is a real challenge sometimes. A lot of phones have this now starting to be built into the system. Apple have recognized that this is a problem, and it's built into the iOS system. And similarly, Google have added similar things in. So, for example, my phone will go dark at 11 o'clock in the evening. So simply all the color goes out of it. So that's a good reminder to me to make sure I really shouldn't be on my phone at that time of night. And various other things that you can use. Alternately, if you want to focus a little bit more, using something like the Forest app is quite a cool method of doing so. So this is where you try and grow a tree. You set particular times, and as a result of that, on the app, it grows a tree. And if you try and use your phone in between, it actually means you're killing the tree. Don't kill the tree. We don't like killing trees. It's not good. But it's a really cool app, to be honest, and it's fun, and it kind of helps to keep you focused on the stuff you need to do. And I think particularly for those more desk-based specialities, this can be quite useful one, because it sometimes can be quite tempting to check your phone in between, and it does come as a browser and that kind of stuff as well. So definitely worth looking at that if you want focus, but at the same time, well-being in terms of avoiding screen time and stuff. And if we are talking about screens and stuff, one of the other things I do like to share with people is methods of learning, because our career is about how we learn. And I think, it's important to know how tools can help you do that. If we're looking at general, all kind of doctors and stuff, although in general practice, we've got appraisal toolkits where many of us would focus our attention, and particularly there's some really good ones. So things like GP Tools and 14 Fish are excellent toolkits. Clarity is good at what it does. I'm not the best fan of it at this moment in time. I think there are better options available, but I think having things like notepad apps, so things like Evernote or Google Drive, that kind of thing, come to mind as really good ways of keeping a track of your individual learning, keeping your ideas locked down, keeping the information stored as you need it and stuff, and they can be really effective. However, if you want something that captures that information, definitely check out a tool called Wakelet. I find it a really cool thing, particularly if you're looking for stuff that you come across when you're browsing. So Twitter is a great example. If I've got tweets that I come across, I can send that to my Wakelet feed, and then I can import that into my appraisal directly through the Wakelet feed itself, and that can work really well. And that works across any kind of websites and stuff. So that can be a really useful tool. And in addition, it's important to look at the different ways that you can learn. So I love to learn through various different routes. I'm a big podcast learner. Interestingly, I found a really cool new podcast today, believe it or not, by the British Association of Dermatologists. So they just started their own podcast. I think it's called Derm. The name's escaped me. They've just followed me on Twitter. I should know this. But yeah, it's a really cool podcast actually, and talks about skin issues in particular. So it's very focused on a speciality, and sometimes that can be useful to check out particular content and things. And alternately, if you're not the type of person who just likes to listen to things, obviously watching things, YouTube, I always recommend, is a really good tool to learn. I mean, some of you are watching me right now on YouTube and learning as a result of that. So that's kind of meta, if I'm being honest, but at the same time, it's a great way of learning skills. And how often have you searched for something and the first thing that comes up is a video of how to do something? my best clinical example, how to do the Dix-Hallpike maneuver and Eppley's as a result of it. And I've taught many people, supported them in teaching them, through using YouTube videos and things. And I think that works really well as a method and a way to learn how to learn and things. So, eGPlearners, I hope you found that really useful. This has been a quick little foray into the kind of the tech tips for new doctors, and I hope you've all found it effective and things. If you do have any comments or questions, feel free to ask right now. But obviously, there are a lot more things we could talk about, and I will be doing so next week on Wednesday at 12:30. So I'll be doing a similar live stream, which you are more than welcome to join me for and ask questions throughout. We're going to a lot more depth, in particular looking at things that's more specific to general practice and how these tech tips can help. And this is specifically designed, I guess, for trainees that are new to practice in terms of learning about various things. So we're going to be looking at remote consultations, going to be looking at other kind of tips and tools about how you can use tech in practice, staying slightly away from the system specific kind of things, because that's even more of a detailed thing that we can look at. But definitely, if you're interested in joining us, feel free to do so. That's 12:30 next Wednesday. I believe it's the 12th of August. Let's just check. Yep, the 12th of August. And feel free to join us. I'll be going through as much content as I can within that time frame, and definitely I hope you find it useful and effective. As always, if you've got any comments or questions, feel free to ask me, whichever platform you prefer. I'm here to try and do any of these kind of different versions, whether that's Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, definitely on YouTube. If you are watching me on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment down below. Would love to see that. If you want any of the links from today's stuff, so all the episodes and videos, as well as all the links to some of the things I commented, are again in the show notes, so feel free to check those out. And as always, eGP learners, we're here to help save you and your patients time by tech enhancing your primary care and learning. And I will catch you in the next episode.